How do we defeat the left for good? Is that even possible? And what do we mean when we say the left? Last episode, we talked about why Charlie Kirk's death has in fact changed everything, but we were very specific. It wasn't just his murder. It was the left's response to his murder. We talked about the various criteria that we see going on within political discourse. We talked about things like the different sides of the political spectrum having diametrically opposed worldviews. We talked about the glorification of political violence. And we talked about what happens when a political movement has a critical mass which believes these things and is willing to openly celebrate it. And we came to the conclusion that's where the left is at in this country. We also came to the conclusion that this is not something where the right woke up one day and declared the left our enemies. Rather, what we recognize is that for well over a decade now, perhaps even longer, the left has considered us their enemy. And we just stopped disagreeing with that definition. So, what do we do about it? Well, that's what we're going to discuss on today's episode. And we're going to get specific. And this isn't going to be, well, just vote harder. No, we're going to talk about what we do as individuals, what we do as part of a movement, and what we should expect out of the Trump administration over the next 4 years, out of Congress, in order to actually achieve our objectives. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit from military terms, because when I went on the Sean Ryan show, he asked me a question. He goes, Nick, you were a Green Beret. And the Green Berets were the guys that we kind of send in to either conduct unconventional warfare or conduct counterinsurgency. In short, we're the guys that are either destabilizing a nation or trying to bring stability to it. And he said, how do you do that? And I gave him an explanation. And if you want to see that, go check out that episode on Sean Ryan. But today, I'm going to go a little bit more into what has happened in our own country and how we reverse the various trends that have taken place and get to a place where we can have civil disagreements with one another. But that sort of society requires some sort of shared commitment to fundamental principles, which doesn't currently exist. All of that coming up on this episode of Making the Argument. I am your host, Nick Freitas. With me in the studio, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
Hello, everyone.
Sporting her cowgirl boots. Right. And then, of course, we have our resident historian, our political prognosticator, the Oracle of Virginia, Christian Hines. How are you doing, Christian?
Sporting my flannel.
He's always
I'm always
flirting his
freezing,
flannel.
so
we're gonna make everyone get cowboy boots at some point. We're going to we're moving past the idea of you can just choose what footwear you want, and we're going to mandate it through central planning.
So we're going that type of right wing.
No more hey dudes.
Yeah. Okay. So first things first, let's frame this up. So when we say the left, we do not mean like your neighbor who tends to vote Democrat who wants a slightly higher marginal tax rate, right? That person may be on the left when it comes to their political philosophy, but they're not a leftist, right? To give you a more kind of maybe a more open definition of this, Bill Maher is definitely on the left, but I wouldn't consider him a leftist in the sense of what we're talking about here. When we talk about the left, we mean something, or leftist, we mean something pretty specific. And when I talk about this from a military perspective of what is our mission, my mission is to destroy leftist ideology. That I consider that my mission. I want to destroy leftist ideology. And what I mean by that is I want it to be thought of like Nazism is thought of. I want it to be thought of as so morally and socially unacceptable that to call oneself a leftist is to voluntarily accept being ostracized by the rest of the country. Because I believe it is a very, very corrosive, degrading, and at its heart, evil ideology. But what do we mean by that? So Christian, let's talk a little bit about this because, again, it's not just free healthcare, right? That's not what we mean when we talk about leftism. It's not really just a set of policies. James Lindsay, your favorite person on the planet, you and James get along so well. But James Lindsay has probably done some of the best work actually articulating that no, leftism, this kind of wokeism, this woke ideology or woke consciousness as he describes it, is actually a secular religion. It's not just a moral philosophy, it's a secular religion. How would you agree with that statement?
He's not the only one that's come to that conclusion.
I know you don't want to give James credit.
Well, I'm not going to, because he didn't come up with the term, but he has articulated this. Yes, he is one of many people that has articulated this. But no, I mean the left, as we think about it, is a secular religion. It has all the hallmarks of it. I would argue that it's what happens when you take Christianity and you actually strip Christ out of Christianity.
I don't think it's. I want to give it that much credit, but I get what you're saying.
Like the idea of wokeism being. I mean, there's subsegments of this theory. I mean, there's one theory that wokeism is a form of secular Protestantism. I've made that argument before. I know that some people would disagree, but the point is that it does function like a religion. It has all the hallmarks of it. It has its own rituals. It has its own dogmas. It has its own priestly caste, right? We've had other people who argue with Lindsay. Yarvin came up with this concept of the cathedral. He used religious, he used religious connotations when he was describing the institutions that they've colonized. So there's plenty of people that have kind of all come to this conclusion. And the reason for it is because of what you said earlier, that it's not like you're dealing with, oh, well, I want government-run healthcare or I want free college. You're dealing with a specific worldview that approaches history as it's moving towards an end goal, right? It's this view of, they call themselves progressives, right? It's this idea that we're progressing towards something. And what's that we're progressing towards? Endless liberation, right? Yeah. Total liberation of the individual. And they don't mean it in just like the libertarian sense. What they mean it by is you should be free from all unchosen obligations. Now, this is the distinction that John Rawls has between political liberalism and comprehensive liberalism. A liberal or a libertarian or a classical liberal would look at this and say, well, I support eliminating some unchosen obligations. They would say the tyranny of the king, right? Or an oppressive tyrant. Or a tyrannical authoritarian government. But there's a lot of unchosen obligations that are out there that are actually essential to maintaining civilization, like the family, like the nation. Like you are not, when you were born, it's not as if your consciousness was this free-floating thing that chose a soul to inhabit. Yeah. You are the product of generations of history that came before you. Even the very language that you're using to articulate your thoughts and your speech, you didn't come up with that. That came from thousands of years of the evolution of, in our case, the English language. And the same thing of your nation is the product of hundreds of years of history. Your family, your lineage is the product of hundreds of years of history. So if you want to liberate the individual from all unchosen obligations, what you're inevitably, what you're going to produce is a fully atomized individual that's divorced from any relations with anybody else. Yeah,
customs, religion, tradition, and anything that could be said to be imposed on one just by the very nature of its existence. And I think you also see this in the way they talk about rights. It's fascinating because they will make these false equivalencies between, like, human beings are the only ones that have to work to survive. No, everything has to work to survive. Or they'll say they're the only ones that need money to survive. No, money is actually money is a human invention which actually makes surviving and transactions significantly easier. You're right. The cow doesn't need to use currency in order to get the grass. Would you like to go live off of eating grass? Like, would you like to join the cow
in the state of nature, right?
In the state of nature that Jean-Jacques Rousseau is so enamored with. But I think that when you look at it, so if you look at, we'll say the structure of Christianity. The structure of Christianity is this idea, I believe a true idea, I'm a Christian, that there is a God. God created the earth. He created morality, like he's the source of truth, of love, of justice. He created human beings. Human beings were given the option to not follow God. We engaged in sin. There's consequences for those sins. In order for God to maintain love and justice, there has to be a way to reconcile that while maintaining justice. So you can't just forgive everything that was done, or else justice isn't satisfied. And if we just all die off as a result, well, then the question is God really loving us? So God maintains love and justice through this process of saying, look, I'm going to pay the penalty in the form of Jesus Christ in order to provide reconciliation. But you still have to choose that reconciliation. And so when you look at all of these things, there's this whether you believe it or not, there's a very coherent and logical thought process within this idea of Christianity and Christian faith. And then God also commands us to do things. Like, we are commanded to see other people as made in the image of God. And so there's this inherent dignity which exists as a result of being created in the image of God. But not all actions are dignified. Not all actions are moral, right? There's sinful actions, and then there's righteous actions. And so,
isn't it interesting how the left's approach to Christianity is always, tolerance and forgive.
Yes.
But at the same token, they've also divorced the Christ figure from it. This is why I said that there is this argument that leftism is a replacement of Christianity, stealing certain elements of Christian metaphysics while leaving out the most important component, which is obviously the Christ figure. So there's no redemption. I told you this like a year ago or 2 years ago, that like leftism is if you had Christianity, but no redemption, no forgiveness of sins, right? You have to perpetually apologize for your whiteness or your toxic masculinity. There's no Christ figure. And we've taken all of this, all of these moral frameworks, the universal application of it, but we've divorced it from the morality through which you're supposed to be applying it. So what it creates is this like suicidally empathetic.
Well, I think there's an important distinction here that needs to be made. If you kind of look at what wokeism is attempting to achieve, or critical theory is attempting to achieve, there's a couple of what we might call doctrinal, presuppositions. One is this idea of oppressor versus oppressed, and it's this idea that to completely be free from oppression is to be free from any of the limiting aspects that prevents you from being your authentic self. So it's kind of this like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We all need food, we all need shelter, and then we need, some form of like satisfaction or recreation. But then at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is this idea of self-actualization. It's this idea of the most authentically version of you possible. Now, what's interesting is that what you really see from a lot of this is this idea of you getting to be your own God.
Yes.
Right? That is whether it's explicit or not, it's in there. And what's interesting is you go all the way back. There's a reason why Saul Alinsky, who we're going to talk about later, is a very, important figure on the left. There's a reason why he dedicated his book Rules for Radicals to Lucifer. The first edition of it, he dedicated to Lucifer as the first rebel who won himself a kingdom, because in Christian theology, Satan is cast down from heaven to earth. But what's interesting is if you look at how sin entered humanity, it all started with a question that Satan asked to Eve. And the question that Satan asked Eve is, did God really say? And then he questions God's truth. He says, well, God gave you one truth claim, and then Satan gives you another truth claim in the garden. That truth claim is, for on the day you will eat, you will become like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. And so what does Satan do? Satan is giving a form of self-actualization. What Satan is doing is Satan is telling Eve, you will be able to be like God once you possess this classification of knowledge, which is interesting because if you look at it, there's a similar conversation that takes place between Lucifer and God when Satan says in Scripture, I will become like the Most High. And so when we say that this version of leftism is its own theology, what we mean is it seeks to replace God and essentially replace it with the idea that you can be your own God. And this idea of what Marx called like the dictatorship of the proletariat is that we're now going to all get to be our little own gods, but then we work in concert with one another to create this utopia,
Yes.
which is heaven on earth through the dictatorship of the proletariat. And the reason why it's important to understand it within this framework is because whereas God is offering an objective truth and an objective morality for which he is the author, and it's not up to us to decide what that truth is. It's not up for us to decide what the morality is. We discover it. It is revealed. And then God says, operate within this framework. And operate within this framework and positive things will happen. Operate outside of this framework and negative things happen. Satan turns that on its head. It's like, no, you get to decide the moral framework.
Well, in the same token, the left does the same thing. They reject the framework and say, no, the framework isn't neutral and the framework is not divinely ordained. The framework is you have set this up as the oppressor in order to put yourself at the, in order to construct a hierarchy and put yourself at the pinnacle of society. And so we are now awakened. This is where the term woke is coming from. We're now awakened to the fact that these are not neutral rules and they're not divinely ordained rules. They're rules that the oppressors have set up. They're norms that the oppressors have set up in order to set themselves at the top of the hierarchy.
Yeah, their argument is no, you use God as a moral excuse for doing the evil things you would.
Well, if you look right now, there's I don't know if you guys saw previews for a cartoon coming out to basically say that God is the bad guy.
Yeah.
And poor Lucifer, and kind of follows Lucifer, and it's a cartoon for children.
Yeah.
So
if you look,
it definitely brings that oppressor-oppressed thing.
Yes, that dynamic. So if you look at all of this, and obviously this is manifested in different ways. Somebody in the chat asked, is this just like paganism? It actually isn't. Because even within a lot of your pagan traditions, whether you're talking about Odin or whether you're talking about Zoroaster or whatnot, there was still, I believe those are false religions, but they still pointed to something that was transcendent and outside themselves.
Leftism is purely immanent.
Yes.
It's in the world. It kind of rejects transcendence, or it rejects transcendence that's beyond
the divine,
the desire of the individual. The self-will is the only thing that...
So if you look at their sacred dogmas, it's what are they constantly appealing to? Well, they're appealing to this notion of equality or equity. They're appealing to this notion of progress. They're appealing to this notion of, liberation from anything that is preventing you from being your authentic self, right? These are kind of like these dogmas that they're pushing toward. Then they have their rituals, right? Your DEI statements, your
land
acknowledgments, pride parades, like all of these things are things that you are expected to participate in to demonstrate your loyalty to those dogmas.
They even have their own liturgical calendar.
Yeah.
Right? Pride Month. What was it? A couple days ago was another LGBTQ holiday that they've created. Like they've constructed not just rituals, they've also constructed festival days and feast days. And that's why I said it's almost like a liturgical calendar.
You got.
Well, and that's because some people will say, well, Nick, this is ridiculous. I know people that are woke, but they go to church. Okay, but watch very carefully
which
the way
churches do they go to?
Yeah, if they go to, for instance, I was watching one at a so-called Episcopal church, and it's obviously not an Episcopalian church in the traditional sense, but they're getting up there, and there's very, very little mention of the gospel. In fact, you will see the so-called priests or clergy within these churches violate centuries of tradition of Christianity. They will violate all of the core doctrines of Christianity. So what they're doing is they're putting on Christianity as kind of a robe, but Christianity is made subservient to their dogmas and their doctrines.
They're using it as a means to push their ideology.
Right. And well, the LGBTQ groups aren't the first to do that either. No. There are a lot of other groups in the past who basically their main issue is whatever social doctrine they care about. And then they tried to bring in Christian elements to undergird it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's well, and this goes back to Gramsci. We've talked a lot about Antonio Gramsci and the March to the Institutions, but it's this idea that what Gramsci was talking about was you use the existing structures, you infiltrate the existing culturally shaping structures, whether it be religious, social, political, economic, arts and entertainment, and you use those to undermine the existing structure and then supplant it with your own. So those which you can subvert and control, you do that. Those which you can't subvert and control, you destroy or you compete with. Ladies and gentlemen, in case you missed it, we made a big announcement that we have joined the Blaze team, and there are big things happening at Blaze. We would love for you to join us. You can join now at blazetv.com and use promo code NICK40 to get $40 off. Go check it out.